Lisa's mother
Okay.
said.
Okay, Dad, he said that they met the girls and they was throwing darts at the balloons. Well, the guy that, the barker that was selling, said,
Just keep talking.
that was selling the stuff, he's, come on over, boys, come over, run these girls a little competition.
Oh, I'll have to call you, I'll tell you.
Goodbye.
And so, and so he says, he's come over and meet and compete with these girls. So the boys come over, and like Dad says, the girls can meet the guys. I think they just tried to miss so that we'd. And so when we got done, when we started to walk off, and the guys, they put their heads together and then they followed us. And when we got a little ways away, they said, "Hey, how would you like to walk around the fair with us?" So we said, "Okay," you know, they was nice looking guys and it was clean looking. And so we said, "Okay," so we walked around
Tell them where I was from.
we walked around the fair. But earlier in the day, my friend and I, you know, they had a public address system there, and every now and then you'd hear, "Oh, somebody's lost, the little boy's lost, and his mother's looking for him. Look around and see if there's a little boy looking for his mother." And then pretty soon they'd announce, they'd say, somebody else, "Have you seen so-and-so? You know, we're looking for them," or something. And so we said, we talked to this girl, she said, "Let's go over and have them advertise for some guys for us to walk around with."
We did the same
And
thing.
we met the boys, and so we told them that, and they said they'd thought of doing that too. And so we went, and so we walked around with the boys, and we walked through the buildings, and went around the fairgrounds and everything. We met at the carnival section of it. We went on the rides, and then we was walking around. And then they says, "Hey, would you guys like to go to the night show with us?" And so we said, "Sure." And so we went to the night show with them. And then they says, "Hey, can we take you home?" And I said, "Well, I'd have to go ask my parents," because we had ridden down with my parents, my friend and I. And so the boy said, that was all right. So we went to where my folks was parked. And we went to where my friends was parked. My folks was parked, and my dad was standing on the corner waiting for us. And so when we talked to Dad, we asked if we could go home with these guys, and he says, "You better go and talk to your mother." And so we walked down to the car where Mother was, and she looked him over and she said, "Well, it'll be all right." And then Dad, he says, the last thing he said, "You come straight home." And so we said we would. But we walked back to the fairgrounds. But when we got, they kept telling us they were from Texas. The boys were from Texas. And so when we got to we was walking up the road, and we come to this old, beat up Model A Ford that was at least 20 years old
Or older.
or more, and Daddy, he walked up to the side of the car and opened the door and flipped the seat back so you could climb in, and he flipped the seat back and told me to get in, and I about died right there. And then the boys, they started to laugh because that wasn't their car. They'd just seen this old car, and so when we got back, and so we found their car, and it was a one-seated car. I didn't even have any kind of back seat, so we had to sit four on it, and but
Believe it or not, we sit comfortably,
four
all in the front seat.
all in the front
Of
seat.
course it was comfortable.
But they took us home, and then when Daddy took me to the door, well, he asked me if I would go with him Saturday night to the movie. So I said, yeah, we went. And so we had a date Saturday night. And when we was on the date Saturday night, he asked us if we'd go, me and my girlfriend and his friend, if we'd go to the air show. They was having an air show out to the airport on Sunday, so we went to the airport. And that kind of started it. So we seen everybody every day for 6 months, and then we got married. Okay, now what do you want to say? Do you want to add to that, Daddy?
That's
Do you want
pretty
to talk?
good.
Well, talk about your first date and how you tried to push her into the.
Oh, that was the year, and we went to the we went to the air show, and then after the air show, well, we rode down to American Falls, and we was going to walk across the dam, and when we got halfway across the dam, why they was gonna he was trying to push me in.
I was gonna throw her in.
Look there, not at me.
Oh, look up there. And so he tried to push me in the deal, and
In the
water,
reservoir.
in the reservoir above the dam, and so I fought him, and he grabbed my blouse and tore the buttons off of the back of my blouse, and my blouse was done up the back. So when I got home, I told my mother about it, and I said, he got so passionate, he tore the buttons off of my blouse. And she said, oh, Bonnie, he wouldn't do that.
Trust us, our mother.
But anyway, that was our dating experience.
So tell us about the time you came to get Mom, and they had people staying with them that were at the school music thing. What was it?
Oh, that was a nasty one. When there was some boys that was from Rigby. Of course, we were from Rigby, and the parents was going to send their kids down to a musical festival or something that was at the school, but they needed a place to stay, so they asked my mother if boys could stay there. And so as they said, yeah, well, they can stay there. Why, of course, I had to give up my bedroom, and I slept on the couch, but they slept in the bed. And so when they come, why, Ray, he said, oh, let's get out of here. So we went out and sat in his car. And apparently, Mother forgot to show him where the bathroom was, or didn't think about it or something. But anyway,
I forgot
pretty
this part.
pretty soon, oh, you didn't either. Pretty soon, why, the door to the house opened and these two boys walked out. Well, his car was parked on the other side of the road. There was a hill on the other side of the road, and so he is parked over on that side of by the hill, and we were sitting in that car talking. And the boys come out, and they walked right directly to our car and went right in front of the car and peed on the headlights of the car. And we were in the car.
I think you added a little there.
And Dad was going to honk the horn. And I said, don't you dare. Because look how they'd have felt.
Okay, where did we get to? Did we get to how they met?
Yes.
Did you get all the way through?
Yeah.
Okay, so did we talk about Dad in the Navy?
Not yet.
Okay, Dad, we want to hear all about your Navy experiences, and just like we were at the table a little while ago. And then we want to hear, and this is during World War II, so let's hear about that. We want to hear how you didn't finish high school because you got drafted.
How you hurt your foot.
How you hurt your foot, your ears, you're allergic to wool, the candy bar story. You don't have to tell about the prostitutes.
Hey,
You
what?
can tell-
Hey, them boys needed to hear that.
Oh, you bet they did. But I'm saying, but you can tell anything you want, but we want you just to talk about your Navy days, and then when you're done doing everything, then you can turn the time over to Mom, because it would be fun to hear what high school was like during World War II.
Well, when I was a young man going to school, I was worrying about being drafted. Of course, I finally got drafted, and that was in January, and I was supposed to have gone into the service, and the couple days before I was to go, I took a few of my friends and we went roller skating.
Were you a good roller skater?
Huh?
Were you a good roller skater?
I could roller skate frontwards and backwards and every way there was. Anyway, we went roller skating, and And when I was roller skating, Blair Calloway, my neighbor, kneeled down when I was roller skating backwards. And he kneeled down, or, you know, on his 4 knees and hands, and I fell over him. And I threw one of my legs, no, both of my legs, anyway, out of joint. And that was in January. And so that made it so I had to go to the doctor. And when I went to the doctor, why, the doctor looked at me and he says he'll call the draft board and get me so I don't have to go yet, because I was really crippled.
Deferred.
And so I was able to stay home until about April, I believe it was. And that was pretty good, I thought. And then I went to was called, and I had to go to Salt Lake City, and I was all alone, and I went to Salt Lake City and to Army base,
How old were you, Dad?
just barely 18. In May. I wasn't even 18.
So you were 17.
And I was drafted. I didn't volunteer, I was drafted. And
So you actually went in the the Navy before you were 18.
but I was just about 18. And anyway, I was drafted into the service, and I spent 10 weeks in San Diego. And then I went home on a week leave. And when I got home, I was so homesick. I just couldn't hardly stand it. I mean, I didn't want to leave, but I had to. And that was the first time I learned what being homesick was. I didn't think anybody ever get homesick, and I didn't even understand it. But when I got in the service and had a chance to come home, I couldn't hardly go back. You know, and I was really homesick. I'd never been out of Salem and Sugar City in my whole life. The farthest I'd ever gone, and it was probably just once or twice at the most, was Idaho Falls, you know, in my life. And so it was all brand new to me. But I went down and I went into the service, and they were judging me to see where they were going to put me. Why, the officers that was there, they walked back away from me and started to talking to each other. And pretty soon one officer came over to me and he says, "How would you like to get in the Navy?" And I said, "Oh, I'd really like that." And he said, "Well, you're getting in the Navy because your feet aren't too good for walking." And that was my lifesaver. And so I was happy. But anyway, I went into the Navy and spent 10 weeks and was shipped out. And I went up to Seattle, and then I was put on a minesweeper. And then from there, we went to Hawaii, stayed there 3 or 4 weeks, and had some special gear put on our ship that would help us find mines better. And then we went overseas, and I went to Midway, and up to a few of the islands, coast of the Philippines, and then I went up north to Okinawa, and we went into the Yellow Seas and swept mines for quite a while, and quite a while. That's where I spent 3 months without even seeing land. But we swept a lot of mines areas, and we go ashore and see some of the Japanese people on some of the islands, and it just scared me to death. I didn't want nothing to do with them because they look at you so funny. I thought they were the weird ones, and they thought I was. So.
They were probably just as much afraid of you as you were of them.
Where were you when the war ended?
I was in Seattle. I was on top of the boat deck. I was up on top of the boat deck getting a haircut by a good LDS boy.
Oh. So when you was over in Shanghai, tell us about your Shanghai experiences.
Oh, it wasn't very good. What I liked about Shanghai was that when we went down we spent a Christmas holiday there, and we went into this hotel, and we sang pretty much all the evening Christmas carols, and I liked that.
And tell about playing baseball with the little kids.
Oh, I went to talk about baseball. We went ashore, and you know how the river, did you go to there with us?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember when we went down to the river and swim, and the river curled around, and we seen them buildings that I said that were buildings I went into,
Yes.
the hotel and everything? Well, now I forgot what I was going to say.
You were going to tell us about playing baseball across the
Oh,
river.
yeah. Well, anyway, we got permission to go ashore and go over to this army base, which was all Chinese, not Japanese. This was all Chinese. And we went up to the main gate and told them what we was coming for, and wanted to know if we could go in and play baseball with the guys. And they said, sure, you know. And so we went in and played a baseball game with the soldiers that was in there. And I thought that was quite an experience. And the soldiers that we played with seemed to enjoy it. And then we went back to the boat.
Tell us about your earaches.
Earache?
Your earaches.
Oh, gravy. When we got ready to come home, that was later. Why we came, we went home, and we stopped at Hawaii on the way back for a day or two, and then we left Hawaii and went straight down to San Diego again. And we was in dock with there in San Diego, and I don't know what happened. One evening I got a bad earache. I really hurt. And it might have been that I went like that and dug it, I don't know. but I got a bad earache and it was cold and everything, and so I don't know what really caused it. And boy, they took me to the hospital right fast. That's Balboa Park Hospital.
Mhm.
And I was 5 weeks in the hospital. 5 weeks? That's a long time just to have an earache.
Right.
But I took 105 shots of penicillin. That's when penicillin was popular. Now they don't even give you a shot of penicillin.
Almost. Well, tell us about the hat you wore to protect your ears.
Oh, yeah, I did have a tender ear when I was in the Navy, and I wore this black hat. And I got permission from the captain to wear that hat. And what I did when I was on the ship, that I was the winch operator. I was the guy that let the gear out to sweep mines with, and then when the evening was over, I would be the guy that'd bring it back, or whenever the time come, you know. And that was my job. And of course, I had a lot of other jobs along with that. I also was the captain of one of the watches. I had 24 men under me, and we would sweep. We would sweep mines, and wherever we went, when it was night. No, that's wrong. We always had men on guard. And when my shift was to go on guard, which was in the day as well as night, why, I was the guy that would get my men up to make sure they got on their watch, and then I'd go on watch with them. And one day I had a couple of my men that was so sick from seasick that they laid down on the gun turret right out in front of the captain's window. And I says to the captain, I says, "Hey, do you want me to get them guys up?" He says, "No, I'll let them have their rest." I told him that they were sick. And so they let them sleep. But you don't lay you down and go to sleep while you're on guard duty.
Right.
But they did, but I was the guy on watch. I was the leader.
So tell us about your friend Pruitt that died while you were.
Pruitt,
Did he die while you were in Hawaii?
he died while he was in Hawaii, yes. And he was really a nice guy. He was from states are at the side of Texas. What is it? Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
And he was from Oklahoma. And but when we were in the Hawaiian Islands, we went down and played a ball game together with our own people. And he was kind of sick, and we took him back to the ship, and he had spinal meningitis, and he was sick for 2 or 3 weeks, and all the time he was sick, in the evenings and stuff when I could, I'd go down and visit him. we talk about church, and he was, his dad was a minister of the Baptist church. And we'd visit and we'd talk about our beliefs. And he was a Mormon and didn't know it. But he was really a nice guy. And then the doctor that was tending him on the ship was drunk all the time. And it's really sad, you know. He didn't have any better sense than to get drunk and not tend these sick people. But anyway, when Pruitt died, why, I got permission to go to his funeral and help bury him and all that stuff. They buried him in Hawaii.
Well, let's see, can you think of any more experiences in the Navy that you'd like to tell us?
Well,
Do you want to tell us about when you came home before we left Montauk? Why don't you tell us about your trip home when you got out of the hospital?
oh my. I met a guy from Long Beach, California, and we got visiting, and I was telling him that I was going to be released from the Navy while I was in the hospital, and he says, why don't you hitchhike home? And I thought, well, yeah, I could hitchhike home. Anyway, he took me up to Long Beach in his car. He had a car and everything. He took me up to Long Beach from the hospital. And then I got out and a pickup went by right then, and I flipped my thumb at him and he stopped. And he took me up to Highway 66. I never knew what Highway 66 was, but it was Highway 66 was the main highway that went from California up to the Salt Lake. And so I got to ride from Long Beach up to the Highway 66 with this guy in the pickup, and then I got out of the pickup and walked over to the side of the road of the Highway 66, and a car went by, and I went like this again, and it went up the road a little ways and stopped, and I kind of started walking up the road to it, and it was a young lady that was driving it, and she was the only one there too, and she asked me if I would like a ride, and I says yes, and she says, how far are you going? And I told her, well, I'm going to Idaho Falls, or to Rexburg, excuse me, and she says, well, I'm going to Idaho Falls. And so I rode with her, and we rode, I left San Diego Hospital at 11 o'clock in the morning one day, and I got home at 10 o'clock the next day. So when I was with her, and we drove all night, and made it up here to Idaho Falls, and when I got out of the car in Idaho Falls, I looked across the street, and there was Melvin Young's mother and dad. Melvin Young was a young boy I went to school with and everything, and we did a lot of fun things together, didn't we? And I asked them if they would take me up to Rexburg, and they said yes, and they took me right to the door of where I lived. When I walked in the house, my mother looked at me, and I think she almost died of shock, because I didn't tell my folks I was coming home. So it was quite an experience.
Mhm. Well, Mom, you lived through the war at home, so tell us about life during the war at home.
The war started, we lived in Rigby, and but they had, even in the small town of Rigby, they had air raid practices, and how was the city organized to get through it and everything. But it seemed like that the war was a long ways away. We didn't have the radio communication. We had radio communications, and that was our closest communication. It wasn't like television today where you see it the minute it's happening. When there was problems in the war, if you wanted to see it on the movies, why, you'd have to go to a movie and they'd have newsreels and you'd see it. But by the time you seen it, it was actually sometimes 2 and 3 weeks late, and even a month by the time we got to see it. But it seemed like that life went on pretty much the same. Certain things got hard to get. Women's nylon stockings was just almost impossible to get. And if you wanted a pair of nylon stockings, you had to go into your store where you bought them and put your name on a list. And then when they got enough, maybe you got a pair, maybe you didn't. But the stockings was a thing. But at that time, the stockings was made so that they had a seam up the back of the leg. And when they had the seam up the back of the leg, why, then when you couldn't get stockings, why, you always looked like you was bare-legged. And at that time, that was something that the girls didn't want to do, is to look like they didn't have stockings on. And so they'd take an eyebrow pencil and draw a dark line up the back of their leg for these nylon stockings. But they started rationing food. We never
And gas.
Noticed any difference. A lot of people in our area raised gardens, and there was stuff so that actually the food rationing didn't affect our family much, and it didn't affect most of the farm families much, but food was rationed.
How much was gas a gallon then?
About 19 cents or 18 cents.
Yeah.
And the gas, the car, that was the worst thing. And so if you had a car, why, it didn't matter where you worked, you only got so much gas, and people had to really save the gas for the people that needed it.
A lot of people had to walk.
Yeah, but we lived in town and we walked every place anyway, so it really didn't affect our family. But during this time, when my dad moved the family to Pocatello, and so he had a job working for the railroad, and so where he went to work was, I've never measured it, but I think it must have been about 3 or 4 miles. And so the gas we got, it had to be saved for necessities like my dad going to work. My dad worked the midnight shift, and he worked nights. And so, and it was hard to walk that far, and so the gas was bad. Was the worst thing, the worst suffering that we had to do. But I never went hungry, or I never went anything, but I know that a lot of people said they did because of the food rationing. But we lived in an area, if we'd have lived in a big city, why, it might have been harder for us, but it wasn't. The food rationing wasn't hard. but I went to school and I was about a mile from the school, but I had hurry and walk home during the noon hour so I could have a little lunch because we didn't have the money. But I decided I wanted to go to work, so I went down and got me a job working as up to that time, if I needed anything, I would babysit people's kids. But I decided I wanted a job, so me and my girlfriend, we went into a theater that was downtown and asked if they needed a job as usherettes. They all had usherettes in their store. So
This was in Pocatello.
in Pocatello. So I went to work for 25 cents an hour, and only worked a little while, and the boss gave me a job as working as cashier, and I was responsible as working as a cashier for the cash report that you had to make out every day. And if you had the night shift of the theater, you had to close it out, count your money, count your tickets, balance your money with your tickets. It was a good training for me. And when school started, jobs were easy to find for anybody that wanted a job, because most of the men and young boys had gone off to war. And so I went and got this job as a cashier at the theater. And then the night watchman of the town would come around, or maybe it wasn't the night watchman of the town, but it was a company that did things like this, and they would come and pick up my cash and take it and deposit it in the bank. The night tellers, I think he just dropped it in a slot, but he would do that. I didn't have to take the money to the bank, but I had to fill out a cash report, and I liked that, and I did that, and I went to school, and the schools knew that the kids worked. If they worked, they had to work, and so they had a program set up that if you kept your grades above average, if you had average or above, and you wanted a work release, you could go to work from 7 o'clock in the morning until noon, and then get out and go to your job, and that give you time to get all your credits in so you could graduate on time. And so I worked as a cashier at the theater, but when I got to be a senior, I decided I need something better than a cashier's job. And so I went and got me a job working for Garrett Freight Lines. And when I went to Garrett Freight Lines, I made 50 cents an hour. When I started as usherette, I got a quarter, and when I went as cashier, they give me 35 cents, but I got a job that I could make 50 cents an hour. And what I did was I was a billing clerk, and I would sit at it was called a billing machine, but it was just a typewriter that fed forms through. You know, you had a box of forms down here, and you'd fill up, then you'd go to your next one and fill it out, and then go to the next one. And what that billing clerk did was, in them days, everything was shipped in on freight cars, and then you had trucks that did local deliveries, like it would, and they had it. It was kind of like
In town.
a post office where a truck had come in or with stuff, and they'd unload it, and then they'd put it in this bin or this bin or this bin, and they all had to have a bill. And so that's what I did, was the typing. Then after I did that for a while, why, they liked me, so they let me have a job where I worked days, and I worked as the cashier for the local the truck drivers, and then I would take their money and see if the money they'd collected was done. And so I did that for a while, and then when I got married, while I was working there, when I'd work the afternoon shift, because you had to work until we had all the bills typed. Sometimes I'd work till 10 o'clock at night, and Ray had come and pick me up and take me home, and so I always had a ride. But where I worked, I lived on the west side of town, and where I worked was on the east side of town, and I always had to walk. When I didn't get off at 10 o'clock at night, I was going through the trucking area, scary, and I had to walk to work and walk home, walk through the underpass that was spooky and dark and scary, and I often wonder now if my folks worried about me when I was a walking because it was there. Gas was about 19 cents a gallon at that time, wasn't it, Ray? And it seems like that you heard nightmares about not being able to afford to buy gas. They'd put the gas in the car, like 1 gallon at a time, or you'd put 50 cents worth of gas in, or how much ever you had. You never said fill it up. You just get what you could afford to pay for, and that was fun. And so then I worked for Garrett Freight Lines until I was married, and when Ray decided to move, when I had my baby, why I quit my job, and because I had a baby and I had to be a mom, and so that was my working experience.
Let's just pause. It's still recording, but we can edit this out. Do you guys want to take a break? You've been at it for almost 2 hours.
Okay, when
I mean-
Marcia and Roland's ready to leave, we'll
No,
quit.
I mean, well, do you want to take a break and then come back and do it? Because we haven't even gotten to the good part, us.
Oh,
You know, your children.
I mean, really.
You've only talked
Then-
about Marcia. I'm number 3.
then you'll know.
No, they haven't talked about me other than she had to be
and then she had to
be a mom.
work.
You talk to her about it and I'll take a break.
So, what is that? Oh, that's interesting. Thank you. Let me see what we're doing here. I'm gonna stop.